you're now going to hear some of our low-end theories. I'm Charlie.
And I'm Corey.
And if you couldn't tell from the intro, this week we're talking about A Tribe Called Quest's The Low End Theory, their second album from 1991, and a good time to do it because A Tribe Called Quest was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame this year. Um, Kind of an interesting time. They didn't really do the hip hop pioneers in order, I've noticed. Like Jay-Z and Eminem got in before
Yeah,
Tribe.
yeah. In my opinion, that was just almost to like ease people in. We're getting into deep cut territory these days, and it was great to see Tribe get their flowers this year.
Yeah, it was. And they got some of their friends performed for them, which was very cool. Like Queen Latifah, De La Soul, those guys. It was a really strong performance, and it included a couple of songs from this album and their first. So it's a perfect time to dive into this very unique album, still to this day. Nothing quite like it.
Yeah, man. I'm a geek on that, especially those performances that you're talking about. All those cats were around at least the same universe, bouncing off each other in their prime. So to see all them, that was almost that was up there with like the end jam where all the artists are out together. But like the tribe induction was a very, very one that really hit me close to the heart. It was well done. And to see a bunch of friends doing it is pretty unique, especially for this year when sometimes I felt like some of the artists that were performing were a little bit farther away from the artists that they were inducting. So it was a cool one.
Yeah, no, these were definitely the appropriate people. And it was also crazy to see. Sometimes you forget that Queen Latifah is a great rapper because she's done
Hell
so much else since then. She's a all-around entertainer. But you forget, like,
yeah.
this is how she started, and she's damn good at it.
She's rough too. Everybody, she goes through movies and this and that. And now that we get into generations that might not have or that might not remember her bars, she's a beast, man. She'll punch you in the face with it with some wild stuff. And she always respect for Queen Latifah.
Absolutely. So, but it was cool seeing her in her element, considering just
Oh
her
yeah.
whole career. It was very cool to see, I thought. So yes, they were all part of the Native Tongues Collective. And to get back to that, this album, we have to go back to the early 90s, 1990, 1991. This is their second album, released with Jive Records, who they've had a lot of people on that label. Let's just say that. Pretty interesting label. And this was a change for them. So Phife Dawg, who is the second main rapper behind Q-Tip, he wasn't as present on the first album, but on this one, he really stepped up and decided to show more of who he was as an MC, so to speak.
Yeah, because on Instinctive Travels, you had a lot more Jerobi White with Fife in the background. So it was this was his time to step up. And from what I read and learn more going through the deep dive on this, it was almost like a make or break moment, even though they were all really great friends and compadres, through the fight up the hill. Now that they were there, they were learning that they were correct. They were awesome artists that deserved to be up here, and it was a make or break moment. So it was integral that Phife Dawg really put it down on this one.
Yeah, and there was a lot of other turmoil going on. While recording this album, the group fired their manager and joined Russell Simmons's group, which was a little controversial for some, but it ended up being smart. If you wanted to be successful, have longevity in hip hop circa 1991, yes, it made sense to join the Russell Simmons group. I mean,
Yeah. Uh, Automatically my brain goes to the machine, whether it's hip hop, whether it's rock, whether it's pop. And I tried to do some deep diving to see. I knew it was controversial because, of course, you drop a manager, period. That's controversial. But it really seems like Russell Simmons, automatically saw their potential, and it wasn't like a greedy grab to bring them through. It was more so a like, hey, you guys are in the wrong position, and I can make this better for you. Um, in the long run. And we're going to go through some trials and tribulations. We're going to go through some lawsuits. It's not going to be an easy one, but I think it's a better place for you to be here. I'm not discounting the fact that Russell Simmons immediately, and I'm not taking away anything from Ali Shaheed or Phife Dawg, but like in my opinion, Q-Tip is one of these once in a lifetime artists that is so versatile on every level of the game that you know, automatically he is dollar signs and worth to any production house or any label, period.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And we've talked about Q-Tip just a couple times on this show, just in his production work, which shows what an asset he was and still is.
Yeah.
I mean, at this point, he's a hip hop legend, but this is super early in his career, second album. But with these tough managers, they were able to get a better deal from their record company and have the contract extended for another album. So all of this did affect how they approached what they were doing on the low end theory. And the title of this is a double entendre of sorts. It's on one hand a reference to bass frequencies, and on another, just how black men are seen in society. That was the point they were going for here. And most of this was recorded on the East Coast. They weren't really part of the East Coast West Coast rivalry in any way. They were their own thing. This is alternative hip hop with lots of jazz samples. And well, there's so many samples on this album. We can't list them all because it's just parts of songs spliced together. This early hip hop sampling is considered an instrument in it.
Yeah, an instrument by far. I'm so glad you touched on it being this low end theory double entendre because the plight, for a lack of better words, of the young black man at this point, and focusing on that alongside these wild bass, low end bass lines, uh, for me is easily seen here as a concept throughout the whole album. Whether I'm reaching or not, for me, it really shows this concept as we go through this album. These weren't these East Coast, West Coast gangster rappers that you were saying, getting mixed up in that stuff. These guys were guys that were on the other side, as approachable and as human as jazz is, in my opinion. And that's really why they rose above all that crap back in the day. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't just tribe, but there was a lot of alternative hip hop that was doing their thing. But super, super approachable. I can't stress enough as we go through this to, think about how close to jazz they are in this approachability.
Oh, most definitely. Yeah, and it is more jazz than even other alternative hip hop groups, I would argue.
Yeah. And as far as those samples being an instrument, again, this was back when you were sampling off vinyl and not being able to get ironically the sound that a lot of producers try to get in there now, that grainy sound. They were working overtime to get these sounds out and pull these sounds off of that grainy sound and off of each other, ultimately, where we're layering at times 4 or 5 different jazz arrangements to make these really awesome and up tempo, as laid back as they feel. They really are in your face beats, especially for this time of alternative hip hop.
Yeah, we're talking early days here, and hip hop's changed so much, we have to ask questions of has this held up? And according to many, it has. This is now considered an all-time classic album. It was ranked number 43 on the Rolling Stone 500 Greatest Albums of All Time. And it just continues to see wide acclaim to this day. And it was immediately acclaimed at the time, like their first album was, but their first album wasn't a big deal commercially. This was for hip hop 1991. This was a hit. This peaked and debuted at number 45 on the Billboard Hot 100. It's gone platinum now, and this album was released the same day as two other landmark albums we've discussed on here, Nirvana's Nevermind and the Red Hot Chili Peppers' Blood Sugar Sex Magic.
Yeah, a wild time. Again, I go to the alternative, but like I always think of skateboarding when I think of Tribe, just as far as where I was. But like, what a great time for people that are loving all different types of music, or a great day, period.
Yeah.
To have all three of those. Platinum in 4 years, gold in a year. It was not necessarily a slow rolling snowball of an album, but it was a snowball of an album that ultimately, like you said, is heralded as one of the best albums, or a quintessential hip hop album, period. You felt it back then. And for me, it really speaks as a blueprint for them for the rest of their career and for the sound of many, many different careers going forward.
Most definitely. I mean, I don't know if you have the Fugees, which we talked about here. This is such an influence on that album, I think.
Heard.
Yeah, did
You
you
got.
have this album back in the day?
I'm not in 91. Not in 91. I feel like the first time I really got down with low end theory was right around freshman year of high school. So speaking to that slow rolling snowball, by the time it went platinum is really when it found its way into my CD case. In fact, I remember the first time I heard it, it was in a buddy of mine's CD case. I only remember, well, not only remember, but I remember because that the cover image, that female body with the Afrocentric colors is burned into my brain from that day.
Yeah.
Such a happy day to find this album, and it's never left. I listen to Tribe on the regular. It's something about their music that just grounds me.
Yeah, and it's a really unique cover. Even before you listen to a note of it, that cover will stick in your head. Like it's one I've remembered just from looking at like the Rolling Stone list, but it's like I know
Heard,
something unique is in here. It's one of those covers that intrigues you like that.
heard.
Most definitely. And yeah, but it's still going strong. The accolades are still coming in. This album's now in the Library of Congress for the National Recording Registry. And culmination of it all, this Rock Hall induction in a stacked year, these guys got in, and I mean, they are definitely hip hop pioneers. It is a
Amen.
little sad that Phife Dawg was not present to be there for the induction, that he missed some of these accolades. That's a real shame, but we're celebrating him and Q-Tip and the rest of Tribe today.
Most definitely.
So with that being said, let's get started.
Let's get at it.
So the album begins with Excursions, which I would say is kind of the album's mission statement. Q-Tip said in the book Check the Technique by Brian Coleman, he said, quote, I took the original bass line, which was in 3/4 time. I put a beat onto the last measure to make it 4/4. I made the drums underneath smack so it had that big sound, and I put a reverse Roland TR 808 drum machine behind it right before the beat actually kicks in. I loved that last poet sample on there too. So that's a lot in a nutshell. I found a great YouTube video about how the production techniques used on this song and others called Sergeant Pepper's Hip Hop. It's from the channel Digging the Greats. I highly recommend it. And really just all this musicality comes together to really showcase that this is going to be hip hop and jazz, and that they've got a lot going on and they're going in different excursions. So I think it's a really strong album opener.
Yeah. Mission statement supreme here. Musically, sonically, just it is perfect way to let everybody know exactly what you're doing on this album. We talked about the production being an instrument here, and you laid it out right there. I mean, we're taking 3/4 jazz bass beats, adding lines and or adding beats and making whole unique lines inside of this hip hop realm, this hip hop space, and it's amazing. Um, their cadence here is also established so perfectly, and it, we'll talk about it more throughout the album. But if I ever really run up against a naysayer, or even in a devil's advocate situation, talking about the Tribe as artists, it's the only one that really ever pops up, and that is, oh man, it always just seems like the same song. But I really think that speaks to them as supreme artists here, because they establish a cadence and they play off it like a jazz performer, a jazz musician would play off these rhythms and these time signatures that they know that are intrinsic to them. So just another beautiful little diamond to add to this bevy of treasure that we get for this opening track.
Yeah, I will say I had to really listen to this a few times to really break down each song one by one because a lot of the same ideas are used, and you can admit like, okay, this goes off, but you do have to give it repeated listens to determine which songs really stand out the most to you. Because I do think there is an element of it kind of blending together at times in the album. I don't think we're there yet, but we do kind of get there eventually, I think.
Agreed, and of course we're going to talk about it more. But while we have it fresh in our minds, try to just pin it there, and also think about the way that a jazz improv session goes, where it's going to always start, or really any music improv situation, where we're going to start with our basic structure and then, like you said, blow up off that. I think that's also a prime building block for the Tribe sound, and another reason why they're so in bed, so intertwined with this jazz improv that they go to and use on this album and going forward. I'm
Yes.
trying not to go super long-winded here on Try, because I'll go all day.
There's a lot to say. There's a lot to say.
Right.
And that's going to continue with the next track, which is Buggin' Out, which is often considered the breakout tune for Phife Dawg. And this is the first time we really get to hear his interplay with Q-Tip, which is really integral to this group's sound. So really, this album does give us I'm sorry, this song gives us much more of an idea of what we can expect for the rest of the album, which is good. After they set us up in excursions, we get an idea of the group dynamic with this track, and it's a good showcase for that.
Yeah, the call and response between them, or the loose call and response between them is really explored here. I'm 100% with you. This is where we get to see Phife Dawg really starting to build what we will see for the rest of the Tribe experience here. There's something to be said about keeping the attention of listeners throughout a 3 minute and 37 second track, where the bass line is literally the same throughout. Like, we don't get a real bridge here. We don't really get a real come off, but you are enthralled, and or I am, you know, I'm still here for the whole entire song. It doesn't wear on me because there's so much play going on top of it. Not to beat a dead horse here, but we go back to this improvisation, or this jazz improvisation, or these really just musicians playing with each other here, instead of a saxophone and a guitar or a piano. We have Q-Tip and Phife, and we get to hear that early in this record and be able to not only register that in our subconscious listener, but explore it before we go deeper into this album. So here I'm go breaking and going long winded, but Bugging Out is a great number two for those reasons, but also it has a grittier edge to it than Excursions did, and it starts to get the body moving a little bit as we go into the album. It's almost like a wake up track here. Not almost like it's a wake up track here going forward in the track three.
Yeah, no, keep going long-winded. This is your element. That's good. That helps me out here because this isn't 100% mine. It's a little different. It's not quite my era. Um, but some topics do remain relevant no matter what the era. And one of those topics is covered in the next track, which is Rap Promoter. It's about hip hop promoters and how they screw with their artists. And yet Q-Tip's really warning younger rappers about this is what could happen to you. And he was telling the truth here. Unfortunately, I don't think his warning was heeded as much as it should have been. I mean, one person who started off as a rap promoter was one Sean Combs. So we let him get powerful. So hearing that and knowing what's going on, I'm sorry, knowing that Sean Combs is in the amount of trouble that he is for the various crimes he's committed, he absolutely belongs in prison where he is now. It's just this song really hits differently for me after being throughout and hearing all of these allegations against Diddy. This song really hits differently for me. And it just shows you that this song holds up in this era of TikTok. It's a different time, but we are still seeing the after effects of when you let bad people get into power.
Yeah, it's wild to see that it still rings true, even with a warning like this. Even though this is probably one of the deeper cuts on this album, one of the tracks that I would say most people don't necessarily recognize right off the top. It's not a hit per se, but there is a lot of stuff that's still relatable into if you really look at where they were, this is exactly where they were. And more so why I tried to dive or why I dove a little bit heavier into trying to figure out if it was a greedy machine run with the Russell Simmons thing, but it was more so the opposite where Q-Tip felt like he was being taken advantage of and finding Rush artist management and finding Russell Simmons and being able to keep those morals, keep those things that he holds dear, so to speak, really is something that he wanted to put down on paper here and let everybody know. So it's wild how this human experience that was happening to them during this recording period really still resonates and hasn't changed much. And it's a little bit validating in a way for me or for us. We talk about this machine stuff all the time. If you're a first time listener, the machine is really the corruption that we see inside of really all types of album houses, all types of labels, all types of the business per se. So it's a little validating to see here that we're not out here spitting conspiracy theories. Smart, intelligent artists, and I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that Q-Tip is a very intelligent man, and he's heralded as that. But I'll say it, as my opinion. These intelligent artists aren't ones to lay back and not and just take the crap. Unfortunately, that so many artists take. So it's great to see this. I love this track. It's a bit of a slower track, but it has more to say than the actual beat does. And I've always dug that about that track. It's a straightforward. It lets you know there's so much awesome narration here from both that it really keeps you enthralled in the story. And you go from a young man all the way through to artists that aren't going to lay down and take the crap. So I dig it. It doesn't take the pacing away. It doesn't necessarily add to the pacing here, but it's a good track 3.
Yeah, that it is. And gotta keep it going with the next track, which is another different song for them, a bit butter. This is the Phife Dawg solo showcase. He really fought for this to be his song. It was supposed to have Q-Tip have a verse as well, but really it's just Phife Dawg except for the chorus, and he owns it. He shows that he's capable of carrying a track by himself. I do miss the interplay of the two rappers on this song a bit, and so for me, it's not a highlight quite of the album, but it does what it needs to do for Phife Dawg, and in that regard, I can appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm with you here. It's a great number four. He does a great job making it through on his own. They beefed a bit about whether it should be just him, and I'm sure it was not necessarily. I shouldn't say I'm sure. I'm assuming that it wasn't necessarily the most positive thing on this album as far as working together as musicians. But that being said, he does a great job going through here. I would be lying if I was to sit here and say that it doesn't feel a tad empty because that interplay isn't here and that it doesn't necessarily diminish the song or take away from the song, but these building blocks that we've been learning as we've been going through the first three, I'd be crazy not to say that it wasn't felt here as far as this song being just a Phife Dawg song. Not a bad song. I love some of the wordplay in here. It's a smooth feeling yourself song, smooth like butter. I do enjoy that, and I love a lot of the times these guys just rap from a young man's perspective, whether it's right or wrong, and let you know exactly how they're feeling. So there's a lot of sit back and laugh moments through butter. Thinking back to my days as a young man, dressed to the nines and ready to impress, smooth as butter. It's a good one, but missing a tad bit here from me as far as a full Tribe sound.
Yes, but the next track is so full that it has outside help. It's track five, Verses from the Abstract. So jazz bassist Ron Carter, legend, played with Miles Davis, plays live bass on this track, which is really cool and definitely gives them some of the jazz cred that they would want with this album. And it also features a sung hook from Vinia Mojica, who performed on Tribe's debut album and was kind of a go-to for the Native Tongues collective. And Q-Tip specifically got her for this track after hearing her sing on De La Soul's a roller skating jam called Saturdays. And she believes that Q-Tip just wanted to one-up De La Soul a bit because they had that kind of thing where they just wanted to outdo each other. Even though they were in this collective, there was competition. And it does work either way. I think her vocals add a lot to the song, and it's the only real featured vocal we get on the whole album from anyone. And because of that, it allows the song to stand out. She's got a very nice voice, so this is definitely a highlight track for me.
Yeah, this is that jam, man. This is I believe doing the deep dive that they called this and another track on here the two crew tracks where they bring in outside artists and they really get down and it seems like everybody's in the same room doing it up. This is such a great track. This is exactly what you come to expect from Tribe, and at the number five spot here, especially after a somewhat empty butter, as far as the fullness of Tribe, we really get everything here, and we get the real first look, in my opinion, of a man named Busta Rhymes and the way he vibes with these fools and starts to really build a trust musically and a camaraderie with this tribe, so to speak. Because at this point, and not to get too far ahead of myself, but at this point, Bust is with another group right now, a trio of young men called Leaders of the New School. So it's wild to see him showcasing on this alongside Vinia, who that's just one of them those sung parts in here that is, you talk about Fuji's, or even like samples on a meth track, a Method Man track, or just these beautiful sung pieces that add this just touch of color to the spoken poetry that we've been vibing with. This track is just one of my all-time faves, so I feel like I'm blathering on here about it, but versus from the abstract, baby, this is, if anything, if you take anything away today, you know, skip to number 5 and get a little sample of what musical genius looks like. I said
Oh,
it.
all right, yeah. And they had a lot of outside help on the next track too, which is Show Business, which is again about how the record business is shady. This tune features Lord Jamar and Sadat X of Brand Nubian and Diamond D of DITC. It's kind of funny to me because you have all these extra people on the song, and yet Phife Dawg ended up having the best verse by far. It's not even close on this song. I don't think this hits as hard as Rap Promoter, and there's a reason for that that I will get into after I let you tell us what you think of the song.
I feel you. This one was, it's always one of those tracks that takes me out of the album. And man, I might catch some crap for this, but it's just a different vibe. The cats that come on to this track, whether it be Diamond D, whether it be Lord Jamar, Sadat X, like they're just heavier. They're heavier guys. They're they at that point, or just regardless, they were saying a lot of heavier things, and they have a heavier presence, in my opinion, that sort of pushes this track outside of the realm of what we've been experiencing. So it has always taken me away. This is another one that I feel like never really ended up being hit status on this album, a deep cut, if you will. Um, in all honesty, there is a Tribe Called Quest. There's a Jurassic 5 track um, later on in life that does this message so much better and stays on the building blocks that Tribe gave them. I'm going off on wild tangents. People might not even know who I'm talking about, but this one, it falls flat, for lack of better words, for me. And on top of falling flat, I guess I'll use the word there, it really does take me a little bit away from the album. It's Gun to the Head. I haven't done a Gun to the Head in a while. Gun to the Head, this is my least favorite track on the album. Oof, I can't even believe I'm saying that, but that's real.
I mean, that kind of makes sense. So I found out that this was not what the song was originally supposed to be.
Oh yeah,
Um,
this was I forgot about this. This was supposed to be Hurdy Purdy. What was it?
Georgie
Georgie Porgy,
Porgy.
right? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it was very different than this song. It was not about show business. It was actually an extremely homophobic track that mentions stuff like Adam and Steve, and it's very bad. If you want to look up the lyrics, you can, though I wouldn't recommend it. I found them quite disturbing and offensive. Frankly, I didn't care for them at all, and this song was so out there that Jive Records, not an ethical company by any means, said this song is too homophobic in 1991. So it's bad. And Diamond D was not on the song originally. Instead, Grand Puba was from Brand Nubian was
Yep.
on it, but he
Yep.
was so mad that they changed the song that he refused to appear on the reworked version. And usually I would not side with the record company interference, but in this case, they were absolutely correct. The song, it's a good thing it wasn't released. It would have hurt their reputation as being socially conscious rappers. And Q-Tip has turned that corner in recent years. He is not, I don't like, based on We the People and the fact that he was on the Janet Jackson album a few years later, I don't think that's really reflective of his views since then. And he was a very young man when he did this. But I was very disappointed to learn of this song's existence.
Yeah, I didn't realize we were gonna go there. So when I was saying there was cats on here saying heavier things, I in their careers, that's what I was alluding to. I mean, Grand Nubians don't fuck around, period. Excuse my language. They I'm not saying that they're homophobic. I'm not saying anything, but I'm saying they're heavier, way heavier. So it almost feels like younger cats vibing with these OGs that or these older guys that are doing it, and they're having fun inside of it, but it ends up being a little bit getting a little bit away from them, so to speak. And then we get show business rather than Georgie Porgy.
Yeah, so not the high point of Tribe's career, any of this song at all. Just, I don't like it. But the good news is that that's over. We're gonna move on to the midway point, track 7, with vibes and stuff, which is a more relaxed song. I'll give it that. Oh boy, this is a kind of a filler track for me for a couple of reasons. I don't think it has the narrative that the better songs on here have, and there are a lot of pop culture references on this album that are a bit dated. It especially bogs this song down. There's so much here that just is not going to be relevant to a lot of people. And I mean, maybe they weren't making it for everybody. Maybe it was for a specific audience. I mean, they definitely had a target in mind, I'm sure, but it doesn't help the album feel evergreen when we're making such dated pop culture references that place it in its era, to put it lightly. This song is not relevant today, really. I don't think at all.
That's a wild way to look at it, and I dig it because it's something that it's just a way that I wouldn't look at it because of the nostalgia factor, because of listening to it when it was. For me, it really is elevated way past filler because of what it is inside of the core statement of the album. It is a super relatable and super almost over exaggerated relatableness with all of the references and the really like in the day references when it was recorded. I always dug this one in the 7 spot because it just swung. That dulcimer tone that just rocks in the background. It really stuck the landing for me as far as what its title was vibes and stuff, not just because of sonic this beautiful sonic space that we have as far as the vibes, more so the vibes of the I'll go out and say the young black man or the young man period at this point in time. It was just that vibe and song. This is one of those ones that I love to put up and just relax to again. So it's not filler from that perspective, but I can see where you're at. It's definitely not one that a new listener could be like, oh, I totally understand exactly where he's coming from. It will probably take a lot of Googling, which I know that they never had in mind then, but a lot of Googling to figure out what these references were. So I can see that. But as for me as a 7, it hits perfectly. It chills the middle of this album out. We come off another crew based run. Not my favorite, but with show business, and then we get to vibes and stuff. So I jam with it as a number 7.
Well, we're gonna get into some heavier topics next, with the next track, which is infamous date rape. So we're taking on the topic of date rape, if you couldn't tell by the title. And it was being talked about in a new way in the early 90s. This subject. And it was progressive for a hip hop song to talk about it and to really be on the side of a woman because, let's face it, quite a bit of early hip hop has some very misogynistic lyrics. And it's just not, it just, that hasn't held up well at all, to put it lightly. And this is a short song. It's the shortest so far on the album, but I appreciate how they took on date rape in this song. They put their commentary on it and showed themselves to have a more liberal view of things, so to speak. And again, showcasing how they are alternative hip hop. And I this is an album highlight for me.
Oh man, that's it's so great to hear other people just be able to experience that the same way. I didn't know how we would have this conversation here. I don't ever know how this is going to be taken. When I talk about deep cuts, this is the deepest of the deep. You don't get cats period being like, man, you get down with infamous date rape because literally by the title, it's something that you don't necessarily want to say out loud. But not only is it something that feels not right to say out loud, but we're talking in 91, we're talking about the intelligence of Q-Tip. And in my opinion, it's such a victory of a song because not only does it get its point across of the wrongness and the no need and the respect the boundaries, but it keeps, I won't say the misogyny of it, but more so the essence of being a young man. It doesn't say don't be a young man. It doesn't say don't be a sexual being inside of a consensual situation or a consensual relationship, but it really says it speaks to this young man in young man words and young man thoughts, and it doesn't cut them down. It says, hey man, if all that's there, go for it and do your thing. If all that's not there, get out, leave. It literally says that in one verse. Like, if that's not the scene, leave. So I think that's so genius and such a victory to be able to not downplay what it is to be. I'm saying man because it's a man in this situation, but what it is to be one of the people in that scenario, in the two-person feeling out the consensuality of the situation. There's no downplay there. There's no demonizing inside of that. And it's a victory for me. It's one of those songs that also I get to, like I was talking about earlier in Butter, you get to really laugh out loud at some of the lyrics because they're so relatable and they're so easily put and easily understood. And that just really elevates it when it's doing an awesome thing, like telling people, hey man, this shit is out of hand. So here's the blueprint of how it goes down. If it's consensual, cool. If it's not, get the hell out. A victory again, I'll say it. A good one. I'm not necessarily going to say this is the one to listen to on this album, but such a cool song to listen to, period, at least once and experience intellectual ways to go at things without demonizing them.
Yeah, you explained that song a lot better than I did. Thank you for that, because I'm just like, oh, am I going to put my foot in my mouth here? Because I'm just
Uh,
like,
oh,
yeah. All right. But yes, thank you for explaining that better. You got where they were coming from a bit more than I did, as much as I enjoyed the song. But it's going to get a bit lighter on the next track, which is Check the Rhyme, which is the lead single from this album and the signature Tribe tune. This was performed at the Rock Hall induction, as it should have been. And samples, interplay, this song has it all. This is totally deserving of its status as a rap classic.
yeah, man. Yeah, man. This is what the number one was. This the number one single, their first single off this album?
Yeah,
Yeah. So like
I
this
think so.
is for me. I'm almost positive. I didn't go back and double check that, but I'm almost positive this was the first single on this album. But long story short, it takes itself seriously. It leads with a jazz hook. It makes that hook a prevalent feature in the song and really builds off of it. Excuse me. And really builds off it. And inside of doing that, introduces the band. Like, it really lets you know who they are. Check the rhyme, check who we are. This is us. This is, for me, the quintessential Tribe song as far as getting to know them. This gives you it all the way. The interplay, like you said, is so prevalent and so beautiful, and it sits on top of this hook that is earwig at best. I mean, I whistled or verbalized all the time. It's one that's always stuck with me. So I jam on this. I jam on this. We're introducing the latter third of this album, and we're still strong on an album that could have fell flat inside of just sitting on its jazz roots here. It's still blowing my mind from first listen to today.
Yeah, it's one of those songs. This is one that's definitely held up for sure. And we're going to keep it going with track 10, which is Everything is Fair, a commentary on New York City in the early 90s and how you gotta survive it. And I love hearing songs about like New York in the 90s because there were just so many different perspectives and groups of people that were present that they all had a different experience with it.
Yeah. And this is also the first time that we really leave. Well, not the first time, but I feel like the first time that it works super awesome, where we leave this jazz sphere and we walk into a funk wonderland. From the sample that starts this off, even to the driving beat that really, in my opinion, starts to feel more like a West Coast beat here, like a more so because of the funk, but it brings that West Coast versatility as far as the driving bass here. We're up the tempo a little bit. It feels grittier. For me, it really gives you that city living vibe that they're going for in the narrative here. And I've always dug it. This one, if you look at the charts and read people's opinions, this one, unfortunately, I'll say unfortunately, in my opinion, is really heralded as not the best on this album. But I love the feel of this song. It doesn't take me out of the album, but it does take me to a different place that fits the narrative, and for that, I'm vibing. Again, we're in the latter third of this album, and we're hearing stuff that's incorporating gunshots and funk, and we weren't expecting that, but it feels correct here. And I dig it. A great number 10.
Yeah, and I love the Funkadelic chorus sample too. That really
Yeah.
pushes this over for me. This is definitely an underrated tune.
Heck yeah.
And yeah, but we're gonna go, speaking of Funkadelic, we're gonna go with some more retro musical styles. Big time with the next track, which is Jazz. This was originally produced by Pete Rock. Q-Tip reworked it, but still shouted him out on it at the end. And it
Yeah.
showcases the jazz side of this group, which is just as important as the hip hop side in their mind's eye. And it's smart because you don't have this music without jazz. And this song also got a really cool video. It was the second single and it had a portion of Buggin' Out in it, but definitely the best video from the album for sure. And another cool track.
Yeah, I've already used the "This Is Tribe" uh example, but this is another one where they literally get to tell you where this jazz influence came from, how important it is, and not only showcase it inside of the composition, but showcase it inside of the narrative, uh, as only they can do at the time, as they were building this sound. This one gets up there, and people recognize it. And I love that because it doesn't necessarily, I'm going to say this, it doesn't necessarily feel like the most original in the sense of this album, most original composition, minus the actual jazz samples, the hardcore played out full samples. But it's cool to see this one ring true to listeners still to this day.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And rings true more than a lot of other songs. Not a lot of other songs, but some songs here, especially the next one, Sky Pager. Um, yeah, if you can't tell by the title, this is the most dated song on the album subject-wise. It does have a general message about consumerism, but they're talking about pagers to get that point across. So, yeah, this is a really short song. Th this is my least favorite on the album. It feels more like an interlude than a full song to me, and it's not unique enough musically to overcome the dated lyrics.
Yeah, there's another one. I go nostalgia, but like I had some five pagers in my day. I understand now as an older man the consumerism undertones here, and I dig that because back then I didn't necessarily hear that as well. This is almost it reminds me of something like P off Red Hot Chili Peppers, or these just like small, almost comedic, not comedically toned tracks or very lighter toned tracks. A simple thought that they wrote out for 2 minutes and had fun with. It's not a album changer. It's not necessarily the one I go back to all the time. And I can see how it is dated, so to speak. But I had some fly pagers, so I can understand.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, the most relevant reference in this song is one that they didn't quite know how it would play out in the future. So I'll give them the benefit of the doubt on that one, even though it's a name that I personally don't love hearing in 2024, even though I don't have much of a choice avoiding it. So
Heard that.
we're not going to speak that name on this podcast, so look it up if you must know. Um, but we're going to go on to another short track, which is what? Question mark. It's really a series of questions posed by Q-Tip, very stream of consciousness. This one was a grower for me. I feel like it's an interesting look into Q-Tip's thought process, and in that regard, I appreciate this song. I do feel like it's kind of feels a bit more like kind of like a demo or bonus track kind of thing, but I appreciate it for that. And again, it does have some very dated references. I was not expecting to be hearing about the Honeymooners on a hip hop album. I was like, what? Did he just say that? What? Okay. So yeah, I wouldn't call this a highlight of the album, but it's a cool experiment.
Yeah, it is a cool experiment. For it being the penultimate track, it's a little wild to see it as an experiment here, but it really is you said it perfectly, a dive into Q-Tip's mind. More so, or other than that, for me, it's a victory as far as the form of poetry and the way he uses that what constantly. It doesn't seem overdone, and it doesn't leave me as a listener being like, what am I listening to? No pun intended there, but it really keeps me going through and just gives me a glimpse, exactly like you said, inside of this flow of Q-Tip's brain. It's another one that you sit back and chuckle a bit. And was it just to alleviate any tension and really give us a clean palette for the last track? I'll leave that up to us talking on the next track, but it very could, now that I'm saying it out loud, be one of the best or the better palate cleansers as far as going into the next track that we've heard in a while.
Yeah, and you need it for the next track, which is the closer, and it's none other than Scenario, featuring the leaders of the new school, including a young man named Busta Rhymes. Yeah, it's crazy to hear this just because he went on to go in so many different directions from this, but he immediately got everybody on their feet. Everyone wanted to redo their verses after he dropped his. Because he was Busta Rhymes, and he still is. It's a classic Posse track. Definitely, of the two Posse tracks, it's definitely the better one. This is rightly regarded as a hip hop classic. It's definitely an album highlight. And just hearing this, I was just almost relieved when this song came on after a couple of songs that I felt just weren't as exciting. And then you hear this, it's like, okay, this is what I want to hear. I wish every song was like this, but not every song can be like this. It's Scenario. It just, it's a once in a lifetime kind of song. You can't go without this one. It's a classic.
Classic it is. I'm gonna check my boxes for last for final song on the album here. Does it give us something, a sound that a different sound that we can look forward to in the future from the artist? Yes. Does it leave us on a finale type of energy? Yes. Does it make me want to start the record back over no matter what I've heard before it? Yes. So as a closing track for me, it is a winner. As far as what Scenario is, this song is literal classical hip hop at the top of its game, 100% over. I turned it on when we started to talk about it and almost shed a tear just thinking about us sitting and really breaking this album down and what this song has done for hip hop throughout the years. It's a classic. It's this isn't like a get on the bandwagon classic. This is, I implore you, or even more so, I challenge you as a listener not to put this on and immediately feel it. I don't care if, I won't say I don't care. You might not understand every nuance inside of the lyrics. You might have to listen a few times if it so makes you feel that you want to understand it, but you can't deny the rawness of the power of this music. And most of that, if you're a first time listener, you might not know how much I love Busta Rhymes, but it is so elevated by his unique way to bend the tempo, to bend the cadence of the rhyme, to also add comic book bubble word explosions, boom, or sounds of a growling animal, things that he just brings in there and you don't even realize it, or sometimes as a subconscious listener, you might not even realize it until a few listens through, but how powerful that is inside of this. It's a classic. It's a classic. And, you know, she might not be my favorite artist, but I going through Scenario a lot this week, I was reminded of the way Nicki Minaj brings a lot of her stuff forward, and I had never really tied her and Busta's style together there, but just a little side note. It's so much inspiration has been taken from this classic. Like I'm literally bouncing my seat with energy while it's playing in my ears while we're talking about this. It's a classic, and it ends this album so fucking perfectly. Excuse me. There's no other way. It really does. It's a perfect ending for this album.
I mean, see, the people I'm gonna be thinking of that aren't Tribe or Busta doing this song are the ones that were doing it at the Rock Hall.
Heard that.
They were, and they
Heard that.
killed it. This and Bonita Applebum, they killed those two
Shit.
especially. I was like, oh, this is fantastic. It was a, yeah, hip hop always brings it out for performances at award shows, and induction ceremonies and the like. They really do. I gotta give them their flowers for that. Even though none of the tribe members performed, the song was really done as well as it could be considering that.
Yeah, it's that crew mentality, especially on scenario where you could drop in an artist. You could be an artist and be like, I'm gonna throw a verse on scenario. It's there. That mentality of community is there in the song. It's so present and it's so easily channeled, in my opinion, as an artist, as a listener. And that's again, in my opinion, why it lends itself so beautifully to live performances, because not only is that a jump up and down song, but everybody can get in. We could do this for days. You want a verse, we'll keep it rolling. You want a verse, we'll keep it rolling. And never done better. Oh, I'll stick on it. Never done better.
Yeah, it's iconic, deserving of its status, and wow, crazy. We're at the end of the low end theory. That's
Yeah, man.
haven't done a hip hop in a while. We promise that you will not wait so long for another hip hop album in the future.
Heard that.
We'll be doing it again soon. I think I know what your grade will be, but can you tell our listeners what the grade is for the album?
Tribe Called Quest, the low end theory. Um, there's not much to say that I haven't already blathered on about in extents here, other than the fact that this is really a full album for me, from the start of that upright bass line at Excursions and that jazz mentality taking us as a vessel through this experience. The poetic genius of both Q-Tip and Phife Dawg and their interplay throughout, the incorporation of whether they're awesome and you love them artists, but whether the incorporation of so many now legends of the craft, especially inside of this alternative hip hop movement. It really is. There's a falter here and there, but they are blinks in this eyes wide open run through the alternative hip hop classic album for me. So I'm going. I rarely go, but I'm going A+ here. This is a classic album, worth anybody from any listener period. I'm not even going to do genres. Any listener period. Sit back, relax, put your headphones on, and enjoy a low end theory.
So this was a not what I was really familiar with going in. I like what I've listened to of Q-Tip so far. Admittedly, it's limited, but I've liked it, so I went into this with expecting to really enjoy it, and I did enjoy parts of it more than others. I'll say that. Some parts of it didn't quite land right, I think, because of the stuck in early 90s-ness of some of the songs, because of the lyrics, not because of the music. The music is timeless sounding. And the way that they put this all together is pretty incredible. I will not take anything away from that. Some of it didn't quite connect with me in the same way I would have maybe expected. The great songs here absolutely did. I'm gonna go with a solid B for this one. A bit out of my comfort zone, a little different for me, but I have a lot of respect for it as a critic. I will say that.
Yeah, man. A wild run through the low end theory.
That it is. And now, folks, well, first, before I make I'm very excited about my announcement for the next album, but we have to do favorite track first. So, what's your favorite track here?
Oh man. I you know what? First time listeners, you might not know this. I usually don't go with the most obvious gem, but there, if you could only see the smile on my face, there ain't no way around scenario. It's a classic. That's that's this album.
Oh, that's my favorite too. There's no getting past that track. It kind of like dwarfs the album to an extent, but is also an essential part of it.
Agreed.
It's scenario. Okay, we're in agreement on that. That's a good thing. But so now that it is December, it is Christmas season officially. And that means it's time for us to do some Christmas albums, which is a annual Turntables and Tea tradition. We each pick one. And my choice for it, I'm very excited about this year. Because if you don't know, my idol Cher put out part one of her memoir a few weeks ago, November 19th, it came out. And she put out her own Christmas album. We discussed that when it came out last year. But she was also an integral part in some ways of one of the biggest Christmas albums ever before she even recorded by herself and with Sonny. Before that, she was part of the Wall of Sound for a release called A Christmas Gift for You from Phil Spector. So, this is a collection of Christmas tunes from some of the early 60s finest, like the Ronettes and Darlene Love and the Crystals. And I am very much looking forward to discussing this standard of an album at this point. There are tracks here that we've been hearing every year for a long time. And Cher had some great insight into the making of this album. And it was very interesting to me that she went so in depth into the creation of this album, but it's because it's such a landmark album that's a part of everyone's holiday tradition, whether they realize it or not. So I'm very much looking forward to us diving into A Christmas Gift for You. Lots of classic songs on it.
Yeah, man. I see. That was really a surprise for me. I didn't know where we were going. I'm excited. That's going to be super cool.
Yeah, I'm super excited too. And I get to talk about my new favorite book. So
Yeah.
that's exciting for me too. So, yeah, stay tuned for that. And we will have A Christmas Gift for You next time on Turntables and Tea.
Peace.